Hi, thanks for talking
Hi,
to me.
Jamie. How you
I
doing?
good. I talked to you briefly last season, so but it,
I
but it,
remember. Yeah.
but it's been a while. The first thing I want to ask you about is, do you, I guess, enjoy the part of the physical comedy? Because that seems like it'd be really fun. You got the part where you're like running around as wild dude, but yet in the next one you also have food all over your face. That part maybe not so fun. So could you just talk
I
about that?
do. I do love that. I'll be honest. That's probably my favorite part of comedy is the physical part of it. And I love that this season they wrote a lot of good moments for me to kind of lean into that,
Mhm.
which is fun. But yeah, I mean, like the moment with the hot wings, which is coming up in an upcoming episode, was super fun to shoot, and we did the first half of it, probably 20 different ways. And then once the spoiler alert, once the milk is going on the ice, we only did that once or twice. But
That's
I love that kind of physical comedy stuff. It's A, fun to do. B, it gets a lot of good laughs. And C, it is really indicative of that style of the
Mhm.
multicam sitcoms,
Yeah.
and especially with these big dumb husbands. Most episodes they would try to find something where the husband's tripping over something or losing something and desperately trying to find it. All those storylines are very classic, so we wanted to sort of honor them and then also poke fun at them.
I did want to ask you though. You made me wonder because I had this discussion with another actor the other day. Do you have to keep when they do that? Like, do you keep eating it over and over again? Like, is that hard? I would think
uh,
after a while it would not necessarily be fun if you've done too many takes.
you know what's funny? They give you a spit bucket so that you just like will take a bite, and then when they say cut, you can just spit the food in there. I'm old school, and so I love eating junk food, and so I sort of had it as a point of pride to never use the spit bucket. So there was a scene in last season where we ordered a big plate of a bunch of like appetizers, like nachos and mozzarella sticks and chicken wings, and I must have had like 20 quesadilla slices, about 15 mozzarella sticks, like all in the course of a shooting. And by the end, I was like, okay, maybe let's not do too many more, or I'm gonna need the spit bucket.
Yeah, maybe that's
Um,
enough.
but no, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to eat as much junk food as you want and consider it your job.
Right. Well, that's true. So can you sort of talk about how his, I guess, becoming famous, let's say, how that's going to sort of affect the way he treats Allison? Because it seems to me that it makes it worse to some
Yeah,
extent.
definitely. The idea of season two with Kevin sort of getting this local notoriety, whether it be through the Worcester Wild dude or when he was, running for, the city council, is he is, already a very problematic person in this house and in this, family. But by giving him the notoriety, it like lets him spread his toxicity and his terrible choices to the whole town. And so it really completely backfires on Allison's character of trying to like maybe help him get famous, thinking that he's such a buffoon that people will surely see what an idiot he is. And but I mean that mirrors some things that happen in our everyday culture, that
Yeah.
sometimes people we think like this guy's such an idiot, but people love idiots. And so, it was a cool way for us to bring Kevin outside of just the house and let his sort of mess spill into the whole town.
Right, right. I know at one point she like says something like she doesn't want to help him, and he kind of is like, "What?" Like he's so shocked that she is not 100% on him. And I think as now I watched a little bit further. I was going to
Yeah.
stop. I know we're only talking about two, but she seems to make more comments like that as time goes on, and is maybe standing up for a little bit for herself. Can you talk about that? Because we talked last time about how oblivious he is. Is any of this sort of clicking that he doesn't like it when it's done to him type of thing?
Yeah, definitely. That is something that in this second season, and I think the writers did a great job of really just dropping it in very slowly. But you spotted one of the spots where she says, "I'm not going to help," and we don't make a huge meal of it. But Kevin really does clock that, like, whoa, she didn't just say, "Okay, honey, whatever you want." Like he really notices that, and he notices how Neil is starting to change around him. He notices how his dad is starting to change around him, and they all throughout the season, if you've seen some of it, they start moving away from Kevin's orbit, and he's starting to become alone, which is not great for somebody who is so used to just pouring their requests and needs onto others and then having everything met without question. So we definitely tried to make it so that by the end of the show and the end of the season, there is an organic build to Kevin kind of realizing that things are changing around him.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say I hadn't really thought about it before, but when I was watching it, like realizing how bad he treats Neil too, it's not just
Oh yeah.
Allison, it's kind of everybody.
Oh yeah, even his dad. He's like super
Yeah.
rude to his dad, and you know, he's very rude to Neil in the way that he just tells him to do stuff, and there's never a sense of like, hey bud, would you mind doing a favor for me? It's just go do this. And of course he will. So, and there's, you know, there's a lot of people that live like that,
Yeah, not
and
good, but yeah.
yeah, it's not good, but it's definitely happening. Yeah.
I was thinking about the fact how she kind of gets this idea to fake her death, and I mean, he seems to love her. He just doesn't get it, and I
Yeah.
would think that that would obviously cause a problem. But yet, she gets in the car wreck. Was he not aware because she has bandages on her face? He never even asks. He just kind of doesn't. I don't want to say doesn't care, but doesn't
Yeah.
recognize it.
I think he doesn't notice it. I think it's one of those things where, you know, he probably, and it could be in, you know, there's a lot of stuff that happens in season 2 in regards to the Kevin's world and the multicam world where we actually don't see all of the scenes. A lot of them happen off camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that a scene, there was something like, hey, what happened to your face? You don't look very good, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, he's not clocking like, oh, you were in an accident, or are you hurt? Do you need me to help you? He's so self-centered that I think it's not that he doesn't notice it, but I think he notices it, gives a quick offhand comment, and then moves on with what his, you know, daily shenanigans are.
Right. I was just going to say though, she did make a comment to Neil I thought was kind of really important. She says something like, when you bleed, he laughs," or something like that. And obviously there's some other moments coming up that are kind of really harsh. You know, what do you think? And I guess this is, I eventually will sort of happen, so maybe you can't tell me. But what I was going to ask is, what does it make him to notice? Like, what does it take that he's going to be like, wow, maybe I need to pay more attention?
Well, I don't want to give too much away, but I will say that he will eventually have a reckoning. Let's say that. There will be so much change happening around him that at a certain point he can't help but notice that he's alone and he doesn't have his regular crew around him. So that comes out in this season. You know, I don't want to give too much away, but he's definitely going to have a sort of a releasing of all of his crutches and support system around him throughout the season, and that's going to cause him to either act out or become a shrinking violet. I don't know. You'll have to tune in to watch and see.
All right. You talked about the food being your favorite part. What's kind of your least favorite part of doing the show? What's, I guess, the hardest part? Not necessarily least favorite, but hardest.
Hardest part. I don't know. Nothing really was that hard. It was a pretty enjoyable job for me. You know, also the multicam stuff, we shoot a lot of those scenes all pretty much back to back.
Mm-hmm.
So my work schedule for the show was like I would work for 3 or 4 days, and then I'd have like a week or 2 weeks off while they shot all the single camera stuff. So it was a pretty cush job for me. I don't really have many complaints. Obviously, I think as a person, as you know, me, Eric, I would love to not have been such a terrible guy, but it serves the story for what we're trying to say with the show. So that's only a selfishly request, but really it was a great job. The cast was all great. The writers were all great. You know, the crew was spectacular. I loved living in Boston. The show, the writing is smart. The show is saying something. So for me, it was all thumbs up.
Is there anything, and obviously him being cruel, I'm sure is part of it, but is there any part of the character though that you had a hard time connecting with, or not really, other than that?
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
I definitely can't connect with the way that he's so terrible to his wife. You know, like that there was definitely lines that I had to say that were so crass and so dismissive and so, you know, chauvinistic and terrible that I didn't like saying those lines, but I sort of liked the challenge of trying to make Kevin as likable as possible when he's not saying these terrible lines, so that when he says them, they're not so like,
So
you're a
harsh. Yeah.
terrible girl, you know. Like if I'm always like jovial and happy, and the audience is kind of like, oh, this guy's kind of fun, and like he's silly, and that's we like laughing at him, and then I can drop in a really cutting terrible line, but with a smile, it shows just how dastardly a lot of these sitcoms slip that stuff in without
Yeah.
us knowing, you know, for years. So I think that was the big part of it, was you couldn't lean into him being this terrible husband, just a jerk to his wife. You kind of had to be as likable and lovable as you could, and then drop in these terrible nuggets that were, you know, just horrible to say and horrible as a husband and as a human. And to do those but sandwich them in the happy-go-lucky guy was kind of the challenge of that role.
Where, other than the script though, is there anywhere you draw from? Usually I'd ask if you draw from real life, but I hope most of it you don't at least bring from your life. But is there anything you kind of either from that you were inspired elsewhere, or maybe part of you, what is there anything you brought into it like that?
Yeah, I would say the eating of the junk food is all me. But the characterization of Kevin, I always viewed as a combination of Jackie Gleason from The Honeymooners and Peter Griffin's character on Family Guy. So just like that, very full of bravado, and he knows that every idea he has is the most brilliant idea ever thought of in the world, right? And then that's something that the Jackie Gleason character had, you know, Ralph Cramden had in Honeymooners. And then Peter Griffin's just complete stupidity is the big part that I added in for the other half of the mixture. But yeah, those are probably the two big sources of inspiration.
All right. Do you have a favorite scene that you're allowed to tease from this season?
I mean, the hot wing scene was one of my favorite scenes. I think that's in episode 2 coming forward. But yeah, that was maybe one of my favorite scenes today.
Okay. Is there anything you're allowed though to tease specifically that hasn't happened yet, or no? Other than there's hot wings.
I'll say this, that I love the way the show ends, and the stuff we got to do at the end of the show was really cool to do, and I'm excited for audiences to see it.
All right, fair enough. Let me ask you one more question, then I know we're running out of time. What's kind of the biggest change that you've seen in the character, though, from the beginning, since he has still sort of stayed oblivious? Is there anything you've really seen up until this point, not in the last half?
I would say the main thing is it was actually very important for Kevin not to change as the show is progressing, because that's sort of like what makes sitcoms so relatable and why audiences love them, is that the characters actually don't change. You know, in classic sitcoms, you know, Woody Harrelson is always Woody. He never gets smarter, right? Archie Bunker never gets enlightened. And the reason that sitcoms are kind of fun is because we know how these characters are going to react, but we just see them in different situations, and seeing how their prism or how their lens of reactions is going to come out. And we know what's going to happen, but we still love to see it. So it's kind of important to me for Kevin not to change very much, and really to always be just barreling ahead with like his mojo of how he acts. But then by the last, 3 episodes or so of the second season, you kind of brought it up. He starts to notice that parts of his regular world are leaving or changing or not there as much or having a different attitude towards him. And that's when he starts to change just enough. And then there's a larger change that comes near the end.
All right. Okay, great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the end. I haven't quite seen all of it yet. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.